Okay, it's Shane and Chris back with the Right Spotters. And today we thought we would cover the most common mistakes we see in fitness writing. Now, it's all great to sit down and put pen to paper or stroke the keyboard and knock out some content, go back, edit it, clean it up, so on and so forth. But Chris and I, we see a lot of mistakes from the work that comes in and gets submitted to us, just stuff that's really easy fixes. And by doing them, it will clean up your writing. Not only will it look great to the reader, it'll look more professional to the editor if you're submitting your work for publication. One of the most common mistakes I see is just overcomplication of explaining the subject. Usually that takes the form of fitness jargon. Now, we've spoken about jargon before, and the use of it and the overuse of it. So we know that it really, whether you use jargon or not, depends on your audience. But the way I feel about it is it's better just to take it out. So one of the most common mistakes I see is the overuse of jargon. What do you think, Chris?
I think definitely yes. It's overcomplicating or using technical terms excessively, or if at all, might be the natural instinct for some trainers because they have all this knowledge, because they spent all this time learning all this stuff. If you want to say that the Russian twist recruits the external obliques in the transverse plane, like that sounds fancy and it's technically correct, it's accurate, but the average reader is not going to know what you're talking about. The Russian twist recruits your obliques or the sides of your abs in a rotating manner. You can simplify it and still get the point across. A lot of that will have to do with the audience you're speaking to, but if you presume that whatever you're writing, whether it's a blog post or a social media post, or if you're writing for a specific publication, you presume that the average reader is somewhat experienced in the gym or inexperienced in the gym, you can't really get away with using overcomplicated language because they're not going to understand what you're saying and they're not going to want to read anything else you write. If you confuse people, you defeat the entire purpose of writing about fitness and nutrition.
It's funny you should say that because I remember I used to read Men's Health. I used to subscribe to Men's Health, used to read Men's Health, used to get the magazine. And they'd use these terms like hip abduction, hip adduction, and all that kind of stuff. And I wasn't a trainer. I really had basic knowledge of working out. I had no idea what they were talking about. So when I became a trainer or was in training to be a trainer and I knew what they meant, I was so excited to read Men's Health. Now, when you think about it, that shouldn't be the case, right? We're talking about a huge publication like Men's Health that's well known throughout the world, and their writers are using jargon like that the readers don't understand, particularly me, who probably had above average knowledge before I became a trainer anyway, right?
It is. Like abduction and adduction it's tricky. It's tricky even if you know your stuff, you can get it mixed up sometimes. That's like the abductor machine, the adductor machine, the good girl machine, the bad girl machine, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you just want to be clear. One way you can kind of compromise if you can't resist the urge to be technically correct and accurate, and I'm going to call it an adductor machine, I'm going to call it an abductor, clarify with parentheses when you're writing it. Abductor machine, parentheses, outer thighs. Adductors, inner thighs. And if you parenthesize it with a very brief explanation, then it's common usage and commonly accepted that you're essentially allowed to keep using that more complicated term because you did take the time to explain it. So you are educating, you are clarifying yourself, and you're still writing the way you want to write. So that's always going to be something that is worth doing. We see that also with ROM. Some trainers will just use a partial ROM when performing preacher curls, whatever. But if you're assuming everybody on Earth knows what ROM means, you know what happens when you assume? You look stupid. So ROM, parentheses, range of motion, then you can use the abbreviation from then on. That's a common writing principle. So if you're going to use mildly complicated language, and we're calling complicated to the average reader, because that's what you're generally writing. You're not writing to colleagues and experienced trainers, and you're not necessarily writing to experienced lifters, unless that's your target market, your target demographic. That's the people who you know are going to read what you're writing, right?
Yeah.
Because audience matters.
Yeah, I saw a meme, I think last week, and it basically said, "Speak Fit Pro to Fit Pro, and speak simple to everybody else."
Makes sense. I know.
Yeah.
I was talking to Corey Van Wyck, and he said it's like using a different language. You're speaking a different language, and your audience doesn't speak that language, you're not going to be understood. Other trainers speak the same language, but I like that, you know.
Yeah, and just as a side thing, I mean, when I read somebody who's college educated, college qualified, and they start writing in the mainstream media, they write like they're still in college. Mm-hmm. Have you seen that?
Right.
It's not bad. I'm not saying it's bad. It just reads like a college paper. And mainly because it uses jargon.
Right. And again, that's what the trainer might be comfortable doing. It might be how they think. If that's the phrasing that they think in those terms, then that's going to naturally be how they express themselves. But when you're writing, you always have to remember that other people need to understand what you're writing. So it has to be clear, it has to be concise, and it has to be something that the average reader, your target audience, the people you think are going to read it, they need to understand what you're writing. Otherwise, why are you writing it?
While we're on the subject, so I'd like to use an example. So there's a trainer I'm connected with called Tasha Iron Wolf Whelan. She's pretty big on Instagram. She's like a world record powerlifter. She does a lot of writing, and she's been a source of mine in the past. And she got into the trap of using too much jargon in her writing, particularly the stuff that she was sending to me. And it wasn't like it wasn't technically correct. It just didn't read well. And you're always hesitant to call people out if they're particularly on matters of personal preference. But I mentioned that to her, that you could probably do without so much of that jargon and just explain it simply. And she took my advice on board, and now she's writing for Men's Fitness. Muscle and Fitness, sorry. And her writing has improved because she's just explaining stuff simply and explaining it to an audience. And that's the real benefit from a writing perspective on not using jargon, particularly for a mainstream audience. Just clarity.
But it all comes back to clarity, because that's the point, is you're writing something, you're putting it out there in the hopes that people will read it and apply it and come back to you for more information, right? That's like a two-step process. Write it, make them want more. So if they read it and can't use it, then you're done. You're cutting out your audience. And it's a relatively simple fix. Just reread your work with the filter of, if I didn't have 15 years of training experience, would I know what this meant? And maybe you wouldn't. Maybe you would. It depends on the situation and the context and the specific example. And
probably, I think one of the best ways to probably pick that up, obviously when we're talking about jargon, is in the editing, when you reread your work later on. And I think we've spoken about before, just leaving it for 24 hours and just completely putting it aside. Once you finish your rough draft, a day or two, go back to it, look with it with fresh eyes, and then you're more likely to pick up those things.
Yeah, definitely. That kind of cool down period after you finish, what you think is finished, let whatever piece you're writing sit, and then revisit it and read it out loud. I was like reading out loud if you can, because it just changes the way you interpret it. And you'll almost always, you should almost always pick up something to adjust or tweak or improve.
Yeah, that's true. And like while we're on that subject, so not only should you make your writing clearer so people can understand it, it also should be easy on the eyes. And now we've spoken about before at the Right Spotters that it's all well and good to have large slabs of text, long consecutive sentences, and it reads, all the information is good, and it might be correct, but it's just terrible to read because there's no breaking up of the text. So that's the second biggest mistake that I see, and it's just an easy fix, is to use subheadlines, right? Use subheadlines, and not even just use subheadlines, just break up your paragraphs. If you have 3 consecutive 3-sentence paragraphs in a row, like ChatGPT likes to do, then it might be good, but it's repetitive. It looks repetitive, and particularly when you see it on a page, it looks repetitive, and it's the same when you have a whole bunch of 1-sentence paragraphs over and over again. It's just annoying to read. And then if it's annoying to read, then the message is lost because you're like, oh, I don't want to read this anymore, even though the information is great. So that's the second biggest mistake I see, is using just the use of subheadlines to break up your text, and also varying your paragraph structure. What are your thoughts, Chris?
I think that's a really big point. Subheadlines are just like, almost, you think of like chapter titles, like in a book. I'm pretty sure you don't pick up a novel and it's 200 pages straight through. There's usually some chapter breaks saying, okay, this is the next section you're going to read about. So, whether it's a textbook or whatever, or fiction, whatever. Subheadlines also help you kind of gather your thoughts and clarify. And it helps the reader if they are going to skim, because people are skimmers nowadays. They just gloss over and want to get to the meat. So you're really helping the reader if you give little subheadlines and little section headers that this is how to do a front squat, and this is the muscles used in the front squat, and this is how to program a front squat. So if and when somebody rereads your work and they want to freshen up a specific point that you made because you're a good writer and you made good points, then they can jump right to that section and they can read what they want to read. So formatting with things like section headlines just helps to organize your thoughts. It makes the information more applicable, easier to apply. And that might take a little bit of work figuring out, I wrote this part. This is like the technical how to do the exercise. This is think of recipes. Here's the ingredient list. That's the first section.
Yeah.
Here's how I came up with the recipe, which nobody cares about. And then here's how to do the recipe. So
that's a great analogy. That's a fantastic analogy, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
It is. And that's what you want to do for your writing, whether you're writing about nutrition, writing about training. You kind of think about what you're really saying, what the moral of the story is of this part, and that's the headline, how to do. And then the next section, however long it is, each section could be varying lengths. Like generally you want them, somewhat consistent, but I wouldn't overstress that too much.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that you pick up, not really as you're writing necessarily, unless you have an outline that you're following, which I love an outline. Because that's also how you kind of organize your thoughts and make sure you cover and explain everything you want to explain in a given article. But if you don't have an outline, write what you want to write, let it rest for a day, then revisit it, and then you can throw in your headlines. But it's really something that kind of makes it also kind of polishes up the look of it, makes it look more professional. If you're doing something for your blog or even on social media, you can't always like bold and underline in social, but do like all caps or whatever, make it stand out. It takes everything up a level.
Yeah, and I mean, those long social media posts that I see on Facebook, they bore me. I have to admit, I mean, I will not read them, and I will skim over them, like we talk about skimming in an article. I think even if you're going to write a long form social media post, I think you can benefit from breaking up the text with headlines and varying your paragraph or sentence structure, because long social media posts are like, when is this going to end? Oh my God. Oh, still going? That's how I feel, right? But if you break it up, like you break up what you just spoke about, like in the recipe, how much easier would that be to read?
It's much, and that comes back to knowing the format that you're writing for. And anything being read online, whether it's on a laptop or a tablet or a phone, more likely, shorter paragraphs and shorter sections is just easier for the user experience. It's easier for someone to scroll through paragraph, instead of walls of text. Like you've probably seen on Reddit, people ask questions, and if it's a wall of text about whatever they're asking, half the initial comments are going to be, please edit paragraphs, too hard to read. So shorter paragraphs, different sentence lengths, it just makes it easier for the reader. And ultimately, that's what you want to do. You want to serve the reader, right? Kind of.
Yeah, or kind of, yeah, right, just a little bit. But like, it's like those two things that were covered. I mean, still see those mistakes today a lot. But they're just such simple, easy fix. That's just such a simple, easy fix, and both of those will just greatly improve the look of your writing.
It will, and that really ties into the really kind of the final point of the most, probably I would argue, the most common mistake: simple spelling and grammatical errors. That is the fundamental mistake you see with writing, and it's probably the biggest offender of making you look unprofessional and just detracting and distracting from your message. I like using the example. If you sit down at a restaurant and waiter gives you the menus and you're there, you got the glass of water and your utensils, and there's like thumbprints on your water glass and maybe a bit of food on the napkin because whatever, you are not going to want to go back to that restaurant no matter how good it is, because it's detail like that. Details matter. It affects your first impression. If somebody's reading your article and you spell egg yolk Y-O-K-E, I don't take you seriously as a source of nutrition information. Right.
Is that like the English spelling? That's what they use in England?
Yeah.
Like they call push-ups press-ups. I can't handle that. It's too much. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, go on.
No, it's fine. But like that kind of stuff, like it's details like that matter. Spelling issues really matter. Grammatical issues about did you deadlift is always one word. I've seen deadlift written as two words so many times by professional trainers, and it's not a matter of opinion.
Why?
Yes, but it's not a personal preference. The exercise is called the deadlift. Like that's there's no question. You can't argue. You can't say, well, I learned it that way. Then you learned it wrong. It's a verifiable fact. So deadlift is always one word.
That's just true. That seems crazy to me.
Because it is.
Yeah.
You know, you're not trying to spell Schwarzenegger. You're spelling deadlift. The basic exercise. Barbell and dumbbell are always one word. The muscles on your upper arm. Hey, Shane, what do you call the muscles on your upper arm? Like when you do curls and press downs, what muscle are you training?
Oh, you mean the triceps?
Or what's on the other side of that?
The biceps.
Yes. There's always an S at the end of those muscles.
Yeah, right. Because there's more than one.
There's more than one. And I don't care if some people say I did a bicep curl. You can say it, but again, it's grammatically incorrect. So don't perpetuate that. Be a professional.
I'm glad I passed that test, because that would look pretty stupid if I failed that.
They just edited the whole section out. I got bad example.
But no, yeah, I got it.
It is. So that's another big glaring red flag, that you're amateurish. You're just, if you misspell muscles, body parts, then you're an amateur and you still have some learning to do. Like, sorry, that's harsh, but that's how it is. So you fix these grammatical mistakes because it affects the way you're perceived by readers. It affects your level of professionalism. It affects how much of an expert in training or nutrition you really come across as. And you should come across as an amazing trainer or nutritionist. That's why you're writing, to let people know how great your information is. So don't trip yourself up with easily fixable errors.
With even the world of spell check and Grammarly and all that kind of stuff that can help with that too. But I think, and this is something I personally need to do more of, is just read your work aloud. Right? Just read your work aloud. I mean, like we spoke about before, when you just put it aside for 24 hours, leave it alone. Probably the first time you go through and edit an article, and you've spoken about this before, is to pick up grammatical mistakes. And it's all fine to use spell check and Grammarly and all that kind of stuff, but they don't pick up everything. In my experience, reading your work aloud, and when you trip over a word, boom, that's when you've made a grammar mistake, right? Because sometimes what you read and what you read in your head are like two different things, and that's why the cooling off period is so important.
It is. It definitely is, because it gives you fresh eyes and it lets you revisit it kind of a little bit unbiased, relatively speaking, because you still wrote it. But yeah, reading it out loud is a great way also to pick up like homonym mistakes. If you spelled T-O-T-O-O or T-H-E-R, T-H-E-I-R, whichever of those, reading it out loud forces you to slow down and look at the words on the page, and you'll hear them. That's why out loud is different than just reading silently. If you have to read to your cat that's bothering you to get out of the room, read out loud to something. Because you'll pick up on things that just your brain didn't notice in the moment of writing it.
Yeah.
So that's one of the easiest ways to improve your writing, is to read it at least 12 hours after you've written. You almost always have no reason to wait that time, to not wait that time.
And in the effort of full disclosure, I still make a lot of grammatical errors. And I think the biggest one I still make is the use of commas and full stops, because I just completely miss them. Right? And again, that's the value of putting your work aside.
It is. I mean, mistakes are going to happen. We're not saying be error proof. You want to make sure the mistakes don't make it to print. That's the idea. Make the mistakes, but then take the time to catch them and fix them. That's what it's about.
Yeah, I remember I used to write for this website called Set for Set. I started working for them, and they're like, Shane, the grammar is terrible. Fix it. And I was like, okay. Because yeah, I was making. I've made all those mistakes. Right. The content was good. I wasn't really making any spelling mistakes per se, but I mean, my grammar was not on point. Let's just say not on point. And they're like, Shane, do it again. And I'm like, okay. Yeah. So yeah, it's one of those, again, it's learned by doing, right?
It is. That's how you improve anything. Writing is a skill. It's a skill you can build and get better at. The more you do it, the better you get. The more you squat, the better you're going to squat. The more you cook, the better you're going to be a cook. It's just put the time in, practice it, and you will get better. Don't just fold because it's tough. Just slacker. Like, try a little bit.
And there's one way, Chris, that someone can automatically improve their grammatical mistakes. They can send their work in to the writespotters@gmail.com, and we can help them. How about that?
I think that is a great idea. I totally forgot that you guys can email therightspotters@gmail.com or send a message on Facebook or Instagram at The Right Spotters.
We're everywhere, baby. Come on.
Pretty much. Yes, send in a message. Send in a message. Let us know a piece that you're writing. If you're having trouble, if you can't iron out, if something doesn't sound right and you're not sure why, let us know. We'll give you a review, and we'll figure it out.
Sweet. I think we just about covered it. What do you think, Chris?
I think that's about it. I think we did good. Fix your grammar, fix your other stuff.
Formatting,
fix your formatting, and whatever else we said.
Yeah, whatever else. But yeah, that'll go a long way in improving your writing, just concentrating on those three things.
It is. Give it a shot. You have any questions, reach out to us. Let us help. Otherwise, we will catch you guys next time.